Hello, my name is Jay Leggins, and today I'll be presenting biotechnology and foods. What are you really eating? So I have the outline of what are GMO, the pros and cons of consuming and farming GMO, and are they safe? So what does GMO even stand for? GMO stands for genetically modified organism, and humans have been genetically altering plants for decades, such as Gregor Mendel's experiment with the crossbreeding of pea plants in 1866. And in the 1990s, GMO produce by way of genetic engineering became commercially available. Genetic engineering involves identifying the desired gene that gives a certain organism the desired trait that one may want to see in another organism. They copy that genetic information and insert that DNA into the other organism, allowing a new organism to grow that will yield the trait that the scientists sought to have. Scientists such as Rosalind Franklin, Watson, and Crick were instrumental in the process of identifying genes in DNA. And actually, the first GMO crop to become commercially available was called the flavor tomato, using recombinant DNA technology. This tomato had a new gene that basically prevented the tomato's breakdown of the outer skin, so it increased its shelf life. We have the pros and cons of consuming and farming GMO. Overall, it seems that there are the cons of unknown factors of farming and consuming GMO foods, but the pros of economic gain and hunger elimination. For the cons, there's an environmental concern of maintaining biodiversity. When takes place or any transfer of pollen, there's a risk of genetic contamination when the DNA from a genetically modified plant reaches a genetically modified plant. This plant could take on the various traits that would otherwise be wild and fit for survival in its surrounding habitat. The wild plant potentially failing to survive could cause ripples in the ecosystem and have serious effects on the surrounding organisms. For public health, there are allergenic risks. Although a GMO plant may be grown or created using a trait from a non-allergenic plant, it doesn't guarantee that the new plant will be non-allergenic as well. So it poses a risk of causing negative effects on people, especially those who may be predisposed to allergies. And there have been adverse effects observed in animal trials as well. For the pros, though, there have been extensive oh, I'm sorry. With antibiotic resistance, I apologize. With antibiotic resistance, there is antibiotics used in feed for cattle, and it may result in the antibiotics being consumed by people through the consumption of meat and dairy products. These antibiotics consumed will eventually lead to resistant germs in the digestive tract. Though this issue is not as pressing as many because of the antibiotic resistant genes being discontinued in many products. For the pros, there have been an extensive series of research suggesting a significant benefit of growing GMO crops, especially to help hunger elimination, whether that be from the modification to allow crops to grow during off seasons or just to increase the yield. Many researchers see that during this time and age, it is important to use GMO due to the increase of population size despite the risks. For economic benefit, between 1996 and 2011, farmers' income has increased by 92 million from the use of GMO crops worldwide. With nematode and insect resistance, the particular insect resistance, Bacillus thuringiensis, and I apologize if I say that wrong, or BT. It is a bacteria that lives in the soil, and it is used as a biological pesticide. Because of the elements found in BT, it is also used in many insecticides and added when added to genetically modified crops such as BT corn. New farmers can combat the destruction of maize crops from invasive insect species. as well as nematodes. Nematodes are essentially parasitic worms. There is a high environmental risk when trying to combat this invasive species chemically, so there have been policies put in place to prevent said processes. So the only traditional route was crop rotation, though crop rotation takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So now with nematode resistant genes being implanted into crops, farmers can save a lot of money and a lot of time. As well with herbicide resistance. Before genetically modified organ crops were a thing, there was the need for a lot of herbicide with farmers, and unfortunately, this led to many childbirth complications. They may have resulted in mental disabilities, including autism spectrum, and also may have posed a physical risk as well. So being able to introduce herbicide resistant genes in crops allowed farmers to use a whole lot less herbicide and cause a lot less risk. I thought it would also be interesting to include examples of genetically modified crops in the US, particularly soybeans, corn, sugar beets, and canola. Those are very popular crops used in the US. Some statistics from 2020. GMO soybeans actually made up of 94% of all soybeans. For GMO corn, it made up 92% of all corn planted. And additionally, potatoes, just to say their reasoning, potatoes were actually genetically modified to reduce browning, even though there is no usage difference. With papaya was used for helping of the immune system. Alfalfa was genetically modified to incorporate antibiotics for feed for cattle, particularly dairy cows. With apples, they also were bred to reduce browning, and also thought it was interesting to incorporate the pink pineapple because of it trending. So are they safe? What the experts say, and what about those with not so much influence? So I would like to highlight the fact that there are many federal agencies that are involved within the safety, but particularly we hear about the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. They regulate most human and animal food, including GMO foods. So they make sure that our food is safe and that are safe and just practices to create these foods and products. There are also the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency who work with human health and the environment, as well as the U.S. Department of Agriculture to ensure that GMOs are safe for human, plants, and animals. I would like to talk about the notion of substantial equivalence because I thought it was a very interesting fact to come across. This idea basically says that um, if the genetically modified product contains a substantially equivalent ingredient present in the conventional product, then there are no further safety policies or rules that have to take place in order to sell it. I thought that was pretty interesting, as well as the precautionary principle. Um, whereas with this one, they are saying, there has to be a concrete example, concrete facts behind the safety and usage of this product, and there can't be any conflicting opinions from researchers. So before this crop or plant product is sold and consumed, it has to be safe. It has to be proved somehow. With that, there is the need and requirement of the labeling of genetically modified products. So I think this is really important because we should be able to know whether we are consuming GMO or not, whether they are quite obvious and whether we're educated on that, that's a separate matter. But definitely the FDA is requiring most products to be labeled as such if they are genetically modified. Um, and what about those with not so much influence? I wanted to include this just because I think it is also important to recognize societal concerns, and just people in general who are the ones consuming these products. So with the ethical concerns, there is an ethical dilemma with the consumerism and the capitalism of genetically modified crops. Companies are going to be producing these products focused on increasing their profits and making sure that, they're losing as much money as possible. But there is the concern of how much safety and how much protocol is actually being used to make sure that there aren't long-term disadvantages and deficits in health that we can look forward to. Um, so it kind of increases that degree of uncertainty. It makes us unsure about what's actually going on, as well as the fact that other countries actually do not allow many of the genetically modified organisms and products to be used in their nation. So that's another thing that, raises eyebrows for many people, of why are we allowed to eat these things and other countries are not. I also thought this was interesting to incorporate a before and after for genetically modified and domesticated plants and f fruits. I wanted to incorporate the banana and the carrot. As you can see, on the left side, we have the wild versions of these plants. And on the right, we have the domesticated, genetically modified version of these plants. So you can see the banana had a lot more seeds, was a lot smaller. And the carrot was definitely a lot smaller. We didn't get that automatic orange and crunch that we love from carrots. So I thought those were interesting and entertaining to incorporate. Here are my works cited, and thank you so much for listening.